Hello and welcome to Crossing Borders, where I have conversations with entrepreneurs doing business across borders and the people who support them, with a special focus on Latin America. My guest today is Lauren Cascio, co-founder of Abartys Health, a Puerto Rico-based company that helps insurance companies improve their processes by connecting them to healthcare providers so that they can better share data. After starting out bootstrapped, they went through the Parallel 18 program and recently raised a round of funding from investors in Puerto Rico, including a follow-on from Parallel 18. Lauren has an amazing story. She graduated university early while she was pregnant with her first child and then moved to Puerto Rico with her family. After getting divorced, she decided to study programming to tackle a new challenge and get her mind off the situation. After being introduced to Dolmarie Mendez by a mutual friend, Lauren and Dolmarie started the business, which now has 9 insurance clients and connects with more than 1 million providers in the US and Latin America. We talk about her decision to start a business, teach herself how to code, and what she's learned from starting a business and scaling it in Puerto Rico. We also talk about the Puerto Rico ecosystem and why it can be an advantage to growing startups. Be sure to listen to the end, as Lauren has some amazing advice for founders. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Lauren Cascio. Hey, Lauren, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being willing to do it.
Thanks for having me, Nathan.
No, of course. So where are you in the world today?
I am sitting in San Juan, Puerto Rico.
And how's the weather in Puerto Rico today?
Oh, it's always beautiful. It's sunny almost every day, although I get angry at the sunny days when I'm stuck in the office.
Yeah, Puerto Rico is a great place. So tell me a little bit about your business. What are you working on in the last little bit here?
Sure. So we have a health technology company that is based in Puerto Rico. We give service to insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies and help them streamline their communication with patients and doctors, their networks.
And how long have you been doing it?
The company was incorporated in 2015. We began operations in the beginning of 2016, and it has been a wild ride since then.
So the insurance industry doesn't have the reputation of being too wild. It's sort of conservative and laid back. Can you talk a little bit about the difficulty of working in the insurance industry and also maybe some of the upsides of being in the industry?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really antiquated. So that's definitely the downside. And there's a lot of bureaucracy, but it is a very sticky business. When you approach an insurance company, and I have to preface this and say that I am the technical founder from the technology side, but my co-founder Dolmarie is she worked in the insurance industry for almost 20 years before we founded the company. So she had a lot of the knowledge and insight that we needed in order to work with insurance companies. But still, it's very antiquated. They have their own way of doing things. They don't like transparency. They don't like new age technology. They don't really want to modernize. Although, of course, they want some of those benefits, and there's a lot of bureaucracy. So, even if you impress some of the decision makers in an insurance company, you have maybe, people with seniority or whatever it is that are tied to projects, have already invested in projects, and it's very difficult to change organizations that are so large and so structured. But once you get in, there is very high stickiness. They, become loyal, and those that investment that they make in you becomes very important to the organization.
So I'm going to jump into the business a little bit deeper, a bit farther in the podcast, but I wanted to jump back and look at how your journey has evolved. So did you know that you always wanted to be an entrepreneur, or were you kind of, as some people say, they're accidental entrepreneurs?
Well, so the short answer is no. And it's really interesting that we're having this conversation today, because 2 days ago, I was asked, not for the first time, but it was the first time that I went for it. I was asked to share my story. And, so I did that. I don't know if we'll go into that, but basically, I studied health trends in college, and I became very interested in the way that the insurance market interacts with members and also with their networks of doctors. And when I was going through my divorce, and I was already living in Puerto Rico, and that is a whole nother story. But when I was going through my divorce, I began to teach myself PHP kind of as like a distraction. I knew that I was working too many hours. I couldn't afford to raise, my kids by myself working that way. And so about 6 months later, my goal became clear that I wanted to combine, healthcare, which was an industry that I always loved and everything that I had studied, and the industry I was working in at the time, with technology, which was like my newfound, obsession. And I had met a network of people in Puerto Rico, and in Puerto Rico, it's very easy to kind of meet, anybody. And so I was always friendly, and sharing my ideas with my network was pretty easy. So a friend put me in contact with Dolmarie. He thought that we were both crazy, but seemed like we were talking about the same thing. And so that was true. And that's kind of recorded history of how, the company came to be. She was working in insurance and was looking for a change, wanted to do more, wanted to make a bigger impact. And I did too. So it's kind of how, the vision began.
That's an amazing story. So where are you from originally?
I'm from Florida. I grew up in Fort Lauderdale. I went to college in Miami, and I lived in Tampa before I moved to Puerto Rico.
And what were you working on before you started this business?
So I was actually working. I have a degree. I have a bachelor's of science in physiology. So I was working as a trainer and a physical therapist here in Puerto Rico, and I had started working in corporate wellness, which is kind of the application of behavior changes and healthier lifestyles being incentivized by insurance companies.
So there's a lot of different ways that you can choose to take your mind off of something or get focused on something, and you chose to learn to code and do PHP. Why PHP and why code? Why not anything else? How did that become the number one thing you wanted to do?
It was just a new challenge. So I started to, read a lot about technology trends and learn, just kind of about the world. I needed, it was an outlet. That it was a big challenge for me. I had always enjoyed logic. Why PHP? Because it was easy. It was easier. I wanted to make like a website. I'm really not a coder even to this day, and my website was really ugly, but I did it. And that kind of opened up my world to, cloud-based systems and learning Amazon and Amazon policies and data transfer. And it kind of just unfolded from there.
It's interesting because I think about 6 or 7 of the people that I've talked with on this podcast have had similar kind of either a roadblock where they said, you know what, I have this idea, but I don't have any money and I can't convince anyone to make this for me. So I'm going to learn it. And they all say, yep, it was pretty ugly when I did it, but I did it. What tips would you give to somebody who wants to learn to code from either zero or a low base?
Learn enough to get by until you can hire somebody who can actually do it. It is, the best way to do it is to just dive in. So, look at a tutorial on like YouTube. They're free. You can also take you can take classes online. Like there are so many post-grad classes online for free. But it's I would say it's very difficult without, paying for like a formal training to to be good enough to actually, if you're trying to build a system or whatever it is to get to that level. But you can at least do the bare minimum to get the idea out there. And then, once you get to a point, you'll need to hire somebody who, that was true for me anyway. I got to a point where things were just not manageable anymore. And so I had friends and a network of people that I had met. And so I ended up hiring a close friend of mine. That was one of the first employees of the company.
And so one of the things I always like to ask is, starting a business, especially one not in mainland US, a lot of the people on here have been from Latin America, is that it's a hard path. It's not as easy as going and getting a high paying job, and it's not as secure. And you talked about coming off of a divorce and having kids to raise. Startup would be one of the hardest paths you might take. How did you decide to do that? And how did either friends, family react when you made that choice?
Everybody thought that I was crazy, and you're absolutely right. It's not the easy route. And it's not a route for everybody. You have to be very comfortable living uncomfortably. You have to be a risk taker. That's for sure. That is definitely an innate part of my personality. That's kind of part of the story, is that I've taken a lot of risks in my life, in my personal life, and now definitely in my career. You have failures, and those are inevitable. But you have successes too. So you have the possibility of really, really devastating large failures, but you also have the possibility of really huge gains that a lot of people don't have the opportunity to, that they never have the opportunity to achieve those types of gains. And so staying optimistic is actually one of, if you do decide that, you want this kind of free lifestyle where you're creating things that haven't been created, and you have, like a true vision that you want to see, completed, you need to stay optimistic. Even in the moments that it's really, really hard and you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, because it's very important not to, be too down about small failures. And that was one of, and it's still hard, even though I don't struggle financially like I used to, it is still hard, if you lose a client or something goes wrong, to stay optimistic and keep everything in perspective.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. It's easy to, when you get that first positive sign with a client, to think you're on top of the world. And then when you get a little bit negative sign, to go really, really deep. And I think the best entrepreneurs that I've seen are able to keep that in perspective and not get too high with the highs and not too low with the lows.
That's exactly it. It's a balance.
So I'm curious about your first meeting with your co-founder, because I had in my second business a very similar thing where I think it was like 5 people all told me, hey, you got to meet this guy, Jesse. He's got a really good idea and is working on something that I think you'll be interested in. And we ended up meeting in a library and ended up basically talking for hours on what we were going to do. And so can you walk me through your first meeting with your co-founder and how that relationship went after that first meeting?
Yeah. So the friend that introduced us, it was December of 2014. And he said, listen, I'm going to put you in touch with this woman that I know. And she, runs an insurance brokerage agency. And she is trying to do something very similar to what you have presented to me. So I want you to go, over winter vacation and create a presentation for her, and I'm going to give it to her. So he gave it to her, and about a week later, so this was in January of 2015, about a week later, he told me that she wanted to meet me. So I came into her office, And she's really, she's like a little firecracker. She's like 5'1". She's in like her stiletto heels and, her office, and I'm there. And she, is just asking me, she said, where did you get, these statistics? How did you find all this research? And then we just hit it off. By that summer, our kids became like cousins, and we were spending, almost every day together, working on a program to implement with one of her already clients.
And how quickly did you decide that we're going to go from just having the idea to we're going to start a business together?
So we met in January of 2016, and we incorporated the company in January of 2015, and we incorporated the company in October of 2015. So we made that decision in October. So it was about nine months later. Yeah.
And so you had a first pilot with someone that your co-founder was already working with. Can you talk a little bit about how you decided to work with somebody that your co-founder already had the relationship with, and what that pilot looked like?
Yeah. So we actually had 2 clients before we even had a product. So we had signed our initial contracts in 2015, but we weren't able to start operating because we hadn't figured out everything yet. So the first one was one of her clients for years, and essentially the product that we have built now was focused on solving one of their issues, which was inefficiently billed claims. And so the system that we have today and the pilot that we implemented then, that was one of the solutions. We actually just did our case study on that today for a project that we're doing.
So what are some of the things that your software helps insurance companies do better?
Sure. So, so if we talk about that, specifically, it helps like fully insured employers understand population risks and the likeliness of medical claims, which are typically very delayed. So it helps them understand those risks up front. It gives them access to manage preventative services. It gives patients access to lab results, and availability of results after they leave the lab or the doctor's office. It gives them a way to track preventative services, and it also cleans low quality data for employers, for insurance companies, and for provider networks. So we have like a lot of prime sourced data in the system that serves as a data integrity threshold. So insurance companies are able to, in a more cost effective way, credential their providers. They're able to, in a more cost effective way, deliver results to patients and also data to patients, like their forms and documents that you're supposed to have from your insurance company. And it also gives access to chronic disease managers a broader spectrum of data for their populations.
And so what's it like selling something like that to an insurance company? Must be a pretty long sales cycle.
Yeah, we've had as short as 9 months, but mostly we're looking at like 18-month sales cycles. It's a beast. And, we actually, had to talk about this earlier this week. So really the most important part is first you have to understand your insurer's issue. Are they paying, per every 4 million in premiums, are they paying, 1 million in fraud and duplicity? Or do they have a real problem with their provider's network? Or do they have a problem, meeting the CMS guidelines for data delivery and data availability? So you have to really first listen to the client or understand what the client's issue is. And then, you kind of offer them the modules that make most sense up front. And then go in. We call it land and expand. So we've done that actually with all of our clients. So we start with one product, and then as they, become, better in that area, we move into the next module.
And how many companies are you working with today, and how many people are on your team?
So we have 9 clients, which probably doesn't seem like a lot for most industries, but that actually represents millions of lives and almost 1 million providers. We have clients in Puerto Rico, we have clients in Latin America, and also the United States. Go ahead.
So what's the difference between the clients in each one of those 3 places in terms of dealing with them, selling to them, and even like pricing?
So the pricing is pretty similar. That doesn't change. We have a price point range, and it stays there depending on how simple or how complex the need for the system is. But for US and Puerto Rico, they're exactly the same because the regulations are exactly the same. In Latin America, it's a little bit different. Now, one of the things that we take pride in is that we can actually implement a higher level of standards in Latin America because we comply with US standards. So they're a little bit less regulated, but they, really should be on par with, privacy standards and all of that.
Did you find that you needed a different sales style for selling to the US versus selling to Latin America? The reason I ask is that some of our companies that have started in Latin America and then make the jump to the US have to recalibrate their sales process based on cultural things. Like in Chile, for example, one of the biggest things that you have to talk about is how can you test this without, if it's not working, the person getting fired. Whereas in the US, it's more about, this is going to make you X money, or it's going to have a lot more efficiency. Do you find that at all with your sales, or are you able to basically have the same pitch?
No, I'm laughing because it's so true. Yeah. So like a US sales cycle is like 9 months, and they just want to know the numbers. They want to know the return, and that's all. They want to sign a contract and then they're done. Well, in Latin America, you are, 10 trips and, 3 dinners and a bunch of beers before like you can even like get into the office. And then finally you get the office visit and you have to like meet everybody. And yeah, it's quite different. Now, one of the benefits of being in Puerto Rico, and then I'm obviously from mainland, but my business partner is from here, so culturally she's Latin, is that you have that mixed culture. So that's really one of the benefits of Puerto Rico. You're not only geographically closer, in close proximity to both state, mainland U.S. and Latin America, but you're culturally closer to both. So you understand, U.S. culture, but you also understand Latin culture.
So let's talk a little bit more about Puerto Rico. What beyond the being able to see both cultures and being almost sort of in the middle for getting to say like Colombia versus the U.S. What's it like running a business from Puerto Rico?
So there are some really amazing tax incentives in Puerto Rico that incentivize you to hire, to manufacture, and to export. That's acts like Act 73 and Act 20. They're sponsored by the Department of Economic Development, and they are amazing. So a lot of people have moved here or incorporated businesses here to export because of those tax incentives. So that's one huge benefit. There's also a lot of talent here, and people want to stay here because culturally it's amazing. You have beaches, you have very, family-oriented people. Everybody's happy. You go to La Placita on Thursday night and everyone's dancing in the street and drinking beer and hanging out. And so people do want to stay here. And so if you can be one of those companies that establishes, operations here and pays proper salaries, you can retain talent. You have great engineering universities here. I mean, I really enjoy, not being from here. I really enjoy living here. I always say I would never move back. Probably I'll move somewhere else in the world eventually, but probably not back to the U.S. I go back, and I love being home and seeing family. But everyone's just like kind of stuck in this like crazy rat race, and everyone's, in competition with the other, and things, people are unfriendly, and it's just a whole different life. And I, made a very conscious decision to stay here. A lot of that was because of the culture.
Yeah, I've loved every time I've been to Puerto Rico, just exactly right. The culture and the people. And you can tell that there's people that are willing to they could be in San Francisco or New York making really high salaries, but they prefer to stay and still make a good salary, but not what they might make in New York or SF.
Mm-hmm. Sure. But I mean, the cost of living is lower. And I think the quality of life, if you can get past not having Uber Eats and, a selection of berries at a local farmer's market, then, the quality of life is really great here. Everyone respects your personal life.
Yeah, it's a really good place. So I want to jump back to, we talked about your first pilot, and now you're with 9 clients and serving 1 million providers. What was that journey like, and what was the inflection point that made you know that this was going to be a real thing?
Well, you still have moments of doubt in entrepreneurship. I mean, that's a common occurrence. Like, can we really achieve all of this? Are we going to fail? That fear is very healthy. I think it keeps the drive going. But it's been a journey. Each client is a struggle to close, and then also a struggle to keep happy. They all have slightly different needs, and of course, you're feeding them off of one core system. But I would say that most of our validation came last year. And we had a few very cool things happen to us last year, achieved a few very cool accolades. So we went through the Parallel 18 program. That is an accelerator that's here in Puerto Rico. It's global. They bring companies from all over, and they try to make them stay and establish business in Puerto Rico after they go through the program. But we graduated from that. We were recognized as the investor's choice at demo day there. We went to South by Southwest, and we actually won the ReleaseIT competition. So that was pretty big. Brought a lot of interest in the company. So that was for our InsureLink product, the ReleaseIT. So that kind of validated the need for we already had sales, so we knew we had market fit. But it was just kind of nice to have a panel of experts tell us that is definitely, a need in the industry. And then I would say definitely this year, we, signing the partnership with the global pharmaceutical company for their global initiative, them recognizing us as a key component for their program, that was a lot of that's pretty validating. So they recognize our technology as one of their core needs in that program to support it.
So let's talk about Parallel 18. How did you hear about them, and what did you think when you started the program?
Okay, so the night before the application process was closing, my friend Mike McClure, who has a company called CometaWorks, they do like web design, he called me and he said, Lauren, I, mentor this accelerator, and you guys should definitely apply for it. And tonight's the last night. So it was like 10 o'clock and I started the application and I submitted it. And Lucas and Saba, we found out, Lucas and Saba called us like a couple weeks later. We had a phone interview. And then, we were accepted into an I don't even think I knew what an accelerator was at that point. But I quickly learned it is a process to help you better actualize your goals as a company. So they kind of put you on this path of success, where they give you KPI meetings, and Melissa was our manager. She would sit with us every Monday and ask us about the progress we made. They rip apart your marketing. They rip apart your logo, and everything. They tell you everything that's wrong about your business model and everything that's wrong about your pitch. They teach you how to pitch. So it was a really great experience. Not one that I want to go through again. It was a lot of time for us. We were running a company while going through the acceleration process, but that was, I would say, one of the turning points in the development of the company and the concept.
And what advice would you give to other entrepreneurs, either from LATAM or US, that are thinking about, maybe they've heard about Parallel 18 and maybe the only thing they know about Puerto Rico is the hurricane? What would you tell them about whether they should participate or not?
If you have a solid business model with some traction, there's no reason not to do it. They give you a grant of $40,000, which will more than cover your moving costs, unless you have, such a big operation that you can't possibly leave for the, was it 12 weeks, 14 weeks? No, it's longer. It's 20 weeks. It's 20 weeks. For the 20 weeks. But definitely it is something that I think every startup should go through if they don't have that background. If you didn't grow up in Silicon Valley or your parents were tech entrepreneurs, it's a really good process because it teaches you about all of the resources that are available to you, and it exposes you to these networks of people that you wouldn't have had access to.
Yeah, it's always fun to go to Parallel 18 to mentor, because there's so many different companies from all over the world and working on interesting things. And I was surprised the first time that I went of how good the quality was compared to some of the other equity-free accelerators. So I think there's something unique going on there that's really interesting.
Yeah, it really is. And then they, something else that they do is they give you that support that if you do want to, maintain your business from Puerto Rico, they put you in direct contact with, the Department of Economic Development and PRICO, and they try to help you, establish your business here. They try to help you with clients, and it's a quality accelerator. And I'm very optimistic about the tech space in Puerto Rico. I think that, with all of the incentives here, and again, the proximity to Latin America, this is just an amazing place for technology.
So one of the things that changed after going through Parallel 18 was that you ended up recently raising some money after having bootstrapped for 3+ years. Can you talk about that decision to raise some money and who you raised from and how that all came about?
Yeah. So we actually didn't raise after Parallel. We were connected with a ton of investors, and we won the demo day, then won South by Southwest. So that brought even more attention from US-based investors. But my business partner and I got a really weird feeling about, the raise process. And we said, okay, well, we don't have like a real reason to raise like at this moment, so we're not going to. We're just asking for partnerships and connections. But towards the end of 2017, actually maybe over the summer, we started to, try to picture our next 3 years. And in doing that, we realized that we were going to have to partner with some real financial institutions. We're going to need, to raise a Series A. And in order to do that, we're going to need some financial experience. So, as you know, her experience is in insurance. Mine is self-taught in technology. And neither of us had, any experience in fundraising or startups or, that entire, we call it like the Silicon Valley, bubble world. None of that was our reality. So we began talking. We know, so Lewis, who is one of the managing partners of the private equity fund that's here, we know him through, some personal connections, and we got a really good feeling with him. So we started conversations, I want to say at the end of 2017. And we started the actual process in January of 2018. So, he kind of just understood what we were looking for. We're not looking for somebody to come in and manage the company for us, but we're looking to potentially raise more money in the future, to, partner with companies that, with capital that will allow us to actualize our vision, to gain more members, to gain more clients, and to get the product, to get the product out there. So, making an impact in our market in both the U.S. and in Latin America. And so he understood that and understood that he would be a financial partner for us. He brings a lot of expertise. On the financial side, he's been through, he and his partners have been through M&A and however many hundreds of rounds of financing and startup and larger companies, both in Puerto Rico and the U.S. So it was much needed experience.
And you were also able to raise a little bit of money from Parallel 18's foundation as well, right?
Yes. So the P18 Venture Fund was part of that round.
And do you think that that's an important part about the Parallel 18 experience, that they can provide that funding for successful companies? Or do you think that it's worth doing even if they didn't have something like that? For example, Startup Chile doesn't have a follow-on like Parallel 18 does.
Well, it's really, it's not even so much about the money. It's about the vested interest, the ability to have, to put the money there, to put to have equity in these companies and have a real vested interest in their success, because their support network is so large. It's not just Puerto Rico. And so for them to have stake in the company means, and, we have a very personal relationship with them at this point, but even if we didn't, that would mean that they are, they are trying to make sure we're as successful as possible, because they have money at stake there. So I think that is a huge advantage for them to be able to do that. And it's something that companies should definitely consider.
So now that you've raised a round of funding and you've done a big business deal recently, what's next for you in the business?
Well, we are right now, this year, we are very focused on geographic expansion. We're focused on making an impact in the Latin American market, mostly, centralized. We're very focused on the global pilots that we have, by, making sure that we have solid proof of concept So they begin to implement the technology with their, with their whole populations. And we are, very focused on, I would say that this year we're very focused on stabilizing the technology and the clients. And that means that, we've built this huge machine that does a lot of different things. And so we want to make sure that our user interaction is exactly what we envision. And that will prepare us for next year. And next year, the goal is to implement actual sales. So we're, a company without a sales team. It's mostly Dolmery, and then I assist sometimes. But so that is, that securing our, client relationships, making sure that after 2.5 years, our clients are all happy, and that the system is healthy and patients are interacting. We have high engagement rates, that we can go ahead and ramp up sales and expand with larger companies.
And what do you think is next for the Puerto Rican tech ecosystem?
I said I'm really optimistic about it. So I know that Hurricane Maria was a bit of a setback because there was no internet on island for about a month. But I'm really positive that that Parallel 18 is making a huge impact, that the tax incentives offered to companies are making a big impact, and that as some of the tech companies from Puerto Rico are gaining notoriety globally, that will have some persuasive impact on other companies that are considering a U.S. base, but maybe not New York, maybe not Miami, Silicon Valley, where Texas, wherever they decide. This is a softer landing for companies. So I'm optimistic that I'm seeing more Puerto Rican tech companies in the news. I think it was last week was announced one of them was accepted into Y Combinator, which is the first one ever. So things like that happen, and I'm confident more companies will continue to come.
Yeah, got to give a shout out to the Brain High guys. They're awesome.
They really are. Yeah, so happy for them, and that's another part of it here. Yeah, actually, yeah. So Dolmery, my partner, she is one of their mentors. So it was pretty exciting for us. But that's something that you see here is that when other companies have successes, everybody celebrates it because it means something for the island. And I think you don't quite get that in all tech ecosystems.
No, that's true. That's a good point. So I have a couple questions I like to ask as we get near the end here. That hopefully are interesting. So one of the things I like to think about is looking back and lessons. So if you could go back to when you just started the business, knowing what you know today, what advice would you give yourself?
Just starting the business. I think, God, that's really hard to answer because you really, you enjoy all of the mistakes you've made because hopefully you've learned from them, right? So that's one of my favorite parts about all of the really terrible life decisions I made in my 20s. They came with this really great life lessons of what not to do next. So I don't know. I think maybe we would have, we would have been a little further along while entering the accelerator process. So when I say that, I mean we were definitely focused on client needs, and I think we would have understood maybe the tech environment, the tech ecosystem, the tech markets better before entering Parallel 18. That would have given us a bit of a head start and probably put us about 6 months ahead of where we are today. Because we wouldn't have had to learn all of that there. which was great to learn, but maybe we could have gotten more out of 2017 had we already had, that knowledge. Yeah.
It sounds like you have a lot of good life lessons that you learned from mistakes. So if you're comfortable sharing one, and if you're not, no worries. Do you have one where you can talk about the mistake and the lesson that you thought was really important to learn from it?
All right. Do you want personal or do you want work?
Whatever you think is most interesting.
All right. I'll give you a few. So at the age of 20, I became pregnant with my daughter, managed to graduate college early, married the person that, of course, my friends and family hated, and then had another baby, followed him through his career in the WWE, and then ended up in Puerto Rico. So all of these really bad decisions, and of course, having children is never a bad decision. They become your life, and they are, one of my largest inspirations, if not the largest inspiration in my life. But you learn from those mistakes what you're not willing to put up with. But again, you're really grateful for them because you kind of cut a lot of, the BS out of your life. So, you just become more confident in making decisions. You become more confident in the person that you are. You become more confident in your abilities. And so they're really great mistakes to have. And that translates to work as well. You mess up in front of a client, you didn't test the system the way you were supposed to, all of these things happen, but you learn, from saying the wrong thing in a sales meeting and possibly you lose a prospect. I definitely am guilty of that. Maybe a time where Dolma couldn't save us. And you just learn. You learn what to say, what not to say, what to listen for. So, all of these mistakes are just important in both your personal life and they translate, there's reciprocity on both sides.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Thanks for sharing. So, do you have any books, blogs, podcasts, documentaries that you'd like to recommend to either aspiring entrepreneurs or just people in general that have helped you out?
Sure. So I really like the Steve Jobs book. I liked all of Elon Musk's books. I admire both of those. I know both of those people. I know they're not, the most admired from a personal perspective, but they have really great, there are some really great values in those books, work ethic values. I listen to Planet Money all the time. I also listen to Tim Ferriss. I read a lot, a lot in New York Times, a lot of Wall Street Journal, constant research. So that's just, respective to the entrepreneur's market. It's really important. But probably some of the most influential entrepreneurs were Steve Jobs and Elon Musk. I like, the things that, Steve Jobs more, the way that he's impacted our lives day to day. There's something to be said for that.
And speaking of day-to-day impact, so one thing that I'm always interested in is changes that you may have made, especially in how you work, that led to a big improvement. Do you have any that sort of stick out in the last year or year and a half that you might be able to share?
Yeah, not everything is an emergency. So I've learned to procrastinate a bit. So in the beginning of starting the business, I would always answer emails immediately and answer phone calls immediately and text messages, and I was always on. And something that was something that I struggled with because it was very difficult to turn off. But I think that it's really important to, attend to the things that can't wait, and leave some things for, for later. And also, allocate what you can. So rely on other people. So, after you're not alone anymore and you have a team, begin to rely on them and trust their work. So you should always hire people you trust to do the same type of work you would. That was my biggest struggle.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, and something that, as we're building the Magma team, I'm trying to do as well. So thanks again for taking the time to do this, have this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. It was really fun and interesting. And I wish you and Abartys Health all the best for this year. I'm excited to see you guys keep growing.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I hope I was exciting enough for you.
Of course. It was great.
All right. Thanks, Nathan.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of Crossing Borders with my guest, Lauren Cascio. If you want to learn more about Puerto Rico and Parallel 18, check out episode 14 with P18's Executive Director, Sebastian Vidal. If you enjoyed this episode, please reach out to either me or Lauren to let us know, and share it with a friend. Your recommendations are how this podcast really actually grows. Thanks again, and have a great day.